Hello, and welcome to Please Me. Last week, Eve interviewed Dr. Leanna Wolf and Kate Wells for a Dr. Ruth tribute episode that discussed our mutual respect and admiration for Dr. Ruth's legacy and how we are individually carrying on her message and work in our own unique ways. This podcast is intended for mature audiences. Eve is a licensed sexual health physical therapist on a mission to destigmatize conversations about sex. Please sit back and surrender to the pleasure of Please Me. Who's looking for a sexy date? STC.com is the premier ethically non-monogamous dating site that also houses a wealth of information regarding sexuality and sexual health. Join the Please Me Health Collective on STC.com and listen to Eve's free live webinars. Use code 37340 for a free trial membership. Maybe you are in the market for some sexy toys to add some spice to the bedroom. Check out the Organic Lovin' link for the best online store for sex toys, lubes, and more.
I was very inhibited to speak about what I wanted in my sexual life with my partner, and I go into the different reasons for that on his side and on my side, and ways all the different steps that occurred to me after turning 60 that have reignited the sense of passion and excitement and pleasure in our relationship that makes me feel like sex is one of the best things that we get to do now.
Hello, and welcome to Please Me, the podcast that aims to destigmatize conversations about sex and sexual health by turning the sheets into our classroom. Today, I am so excited to welcome Linda Ugelow to the show. She is a speaking confidence coach and author. She wrote the book, Delight in the Limelight, Overcoming Your Fear of Being Seen and Realize Your Dream. She is also the host of the podcast called Delight in the Limelight. And what is amazing to me is that she was formerly stricken with fear of public speaking. And now she teaches entrepreneurs, authors, corporate executives, and business leaders and professionals to transform their experience from dread to delight when it comes to public speaking. And I am so excited to welcome you to the show today. Welcome to Please Me, Linda. How are you today?
I'm great. I'm so happy to be here with you, Eve.
Me too. I have to say that it was wonderful to make the connection with you at PodFest. And here we are today actually speaking. So amazing to connect with you again.
Yes.
So I wanted to ask you, I know that when I was in my early 20s, and I would say in the beginnings of my first quote unquote adult relationship, I would have such fear around having conversations with my partner about just about everything. I was really shut down internally. And I remember having to write things down. Anything that I felt fear about telling him, I would write it down on a piece of paper so that I could communicate that to him. That's how strong my fear was. And I just wonder how you use the skills that you teach to translate into a relationship.
I love that story. And what it shows me is, yes, you had the fear, but you also had the creativity to discover a tool that you could use to help you speak. Whereas, like in my personal case, I probably just wouldn't say anything because I'd be too afraid and I didn't have the skills. I'm thinking about if we knew each other at that time and you had come to me for speaking confidence, probably what I would do is ask, where in your life did you feel shut down? Who did you feel shut down by? Was it a parent? Was it a teacher? Was it classmates? Were you bullied or shamed or rejected or ignored? What are the possible root causes of feeling like it's not okay to communicate? And then there's also, what messages do we receive about communicating, especially intimately? What are our models? What do we pick up from movies and books and conversations with other teenagers who don't know what they're doing? And so that's probably how we would work. And then we would do some clearing or healing activities. I take a multimodality creative approach using emotional freedom technique, people know as EFT tapping, creative visualization. But what I like what you did is you relied on having the words to say and having them on a piece of paper. It's almost as if that piece of paper gave you some permission and courage to say, okay, I've got this piece of paper. I don't know if did you actually hold the piece of paper when you spoke to your partner?
I would give it to him and let him read it, but I would hide my face. Like I didn't want to be seen when he was reading it. It was just so ingrained in me. And this was me pre therapy, pre working on myself, all of that. So I feel like that really did help. And what you just said therapeutically is something that really helped me.
So that what I describe about the root causes resonates with you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes. And so that is part of in my book, Delight in the Limelight, the first part of the framework, the inner freedom framework is to reveal and heal, reveal the root causes and heal them. The second thing might be, and also related to what you're talking about, and I love that you gave me this example, is what are the things we're telling ourselves? Because a lot of the things we tell ourselves make us feel unsafe as well. I don't know if you remember at that time because it was a long time ago, not to say that, but maybe was words like, "Oh, this is so embarrassing. How can you be so fill in the blank? What's the matter with you?" It could be any of these things that if we think when we hear these words in our own head that they're neutral, but they're actually not because if you say them out loud with the name of a person who you care about, a dear friend or a niece or nephew or child. Like if I said to my child, Who do you think you are?" That's not neutral. That's actually something my mother said to me all the time. And it was always something in my head too that I had to heal. So that's part two is how we can heal. And then the third part is how do we repattern our habits of self expression, which, and our habits of self expression are our breath, the way we use our voice, the kinds of perspective and viewpoints we have, and how we use our body, all the ways of self expression, which obviously also have parallels in the bedroom.
Oh, yes, they do. Absolutely. And so, how do you talk to your partner? And I'm thinking about not just in relationships, because really communication starts with the first time you meet somebody, right? Your very first date, whether it's a first date or you've been married for 30 years, communication can be fantastic or it can be disastrous. And so, how do you translate what you teach to the professionals in the boardroom? How to help couples or people that want to help communicate in the bedroom, let's say?
Let me preface this by saying I would label confidence in the bedroom as something that I am still actively working on.
Okay.
And certainly learning to speak with confidence, it's my growing edge. I think back to the very first night that I met my husband, and I remember him coming up to me and standing like right against me and feeling his desire to sleep together and how I capitulated, but I really wouldn't have wanted to. I would have wanted to wait. And I've told him that now, but maybe 30 some odd years later, but I didn't tell him that for a long time, that I really wished that we hadn't slept together the first night. And I think I avoided a lot of speaking with him about sexuality. I think there were a few times that I attempted to tell him what I liked, and I felt like he became very self-conscious and defensive, and that told me back off. So I didn't say anything for a very long time. And instead, what I felt like I did was mold myself around him to the degree I felt like I could, and I held myself back in other ways that I felt like it was not comfortable. So we had a sex life, but it was not as frequent as he would have liked. And it wasn't as delicious as I would have liked. But I felt like I didn't have the words to describe what I was looking for, and I didn't have the means to do it in a way that I felt he could hear it without feeling defensive. And that kind of went on for a couple of decades.
I so appreciate your honesty because I feel like we often do things that later on we regret, right? And luckily, this became your partner and you married him and things went on and you developed a relationship with him. But if that hadn't happened, and you did have sex with him after the first date and you were not feeling confident about that experience, that could have really been a bigger regret. And the fact that you were able to verbalize that to him afterwards is a wonderful step in the right direction. And again, your honesty about this still being an area where you're trying to work towards improving. And we all have areas of improvement. You being honest about that, I really do appreciate. So, how did you? Because you mentioned in our communication in the past that you reignited a stale sex life with your spouse after you were in your 60s. So,
Yes.
can you tell me how that went about?
Yes. I was thinking recently when I first became an online entrepreneur, there was talk about the necessity or the advantage of being in touch with your sexuality to be a powerful entrepreneur. And I don't hear talk about that these days, but back in 2000, let's say 14, 15, 16, I saw that everywhere. So that definitely put a little bee in my bonnet of, oh, maybe this is something that would be good for me to investigate. And the first thing was actually a course that I happened to come across. I can't remember exactly. It was like a blueprint of some kind of a blueprint of how we communicate. And remember there being five parts. One was like sexual, sensual, energetic, kinky, and I think she called it shape shifting. And it was a
Okay.
course that invited couples to explore how we touch each other in different ways. So we touch each other in each of those five ways. It's really the fifth way is really just a combo. But kinky might be like pinching or slapping or scratching, whereas sexual might be more passionate. Sensual might be just like feeling the sensuality of touching, and what was the other one? Energetic. Might be hovering your hands over or feeling the energy between people. And I remember, again, my husband was very self conscious about doing it, but he did it. And this definitely got us over the hump into something new from some, it wasn't bad. It was pretty good. He's very into pleasing me. So I always felt like he always did his best to make sure I was turned on and I had plenty of time. And I thought he was a very considerate lover. But this, it was still rote, and this got us into trying some new things. So that was number one. Then a friend of mine introduced me to a book called Passionate Marriage. I didn't feel like I got all that much from it. I was hoping for something more. But I did a particular exercise. I remember he was talking about holding till relaxed. And I really enjoyed that because I always felt I couldn't sleep with my husband touching me because I always felt this sexual energy. And I felt like he was and I always felt pressed by it. So we have our own separate covers. Sometimes we sleep in our own rooms. And when we have sexual encounters, that happens at other times. But this idea of holding to relax, I felt, well, let's try this because I felt comfortable saying, hey, I read this in the book. Do you want to try it? And he would say, yes, he was always open to anything I suggested. The next thing that happened was we decided to do an ayahuasca weekend. My sister, who lives in Denmark, had an experience in it. And she said, if you ever have a chance, I recommend this. It's not easy, it's hard work, it's really intense, but I found it really life changing. So my husband and I decided to sign up for a weekend. I can't say anything more about when or where. During the evening, we were separated, so we weren't allowed to be next to each other. And I was really glad that happened because when the plant medicine overtook me, and it was incredibly intense, and that's for another conversation. But one of the things that happened, which just filled me with a completely new feeling, was this strong libido. And I just felt like my whole body was filled with this sexual energy that I hadn't felt in 30 years. I had gotten to a place where I thought, maybe I just will never feel that again. That feeling when I was a teenager or a young adult where I was turned on. I just and I missed it. So all of a sudden it was like, "Oh my god," and I looked over, it was dark, but I imagined my husband on the other side of the room, and I thought, "It's a good thing he's way over there because I would be I would pounce on him right now." It was amazing. And I really welcomed that, and it's funny because at the time, I didn't think of it like, when I wrote in my journal afterwards, when I was debriefing the process, it didn't occur to me how significant that was, this feeling of libido, even though it was so strong. When I thought about the ayahuasca experience, I was thinking about other things that it brought to me, but now that I look back, it was the turning point. It was that point that I realized I have this in my body. I just had so many filters on that I wasn't able to access it. And maybe one of the things that the ayahuasca did for me, because what I was had asked the plant medicine in my intention was to remove the blocks that were keeping me from moving forward. So maybe that's what that experience had been about. And I'm actually saying this to you thinking for the first time these things.
That's incredible. And kudos to your husband for always saying yes and being open to all of your suggestions, because
Mhm.
that is how we grow. And when we have a partner that's closed off to our suggestions or our communication, it really makes it difficult. So kudos to him for being open and for wanting to try ayahuasca with you. And
He was into it. I was holding back because I thought this sounds so intense. I don't know if I want to do it, but I'm very glad I did.
yes, and your experience, you were probably thinking of blockages that you had for some other thing in your life unrelated to sex. But what the ayahuasca told you was that your libido was the biggest thing that was blocked and you needed that released. And so,
Yes.
how incredible to find that out after so many years of not having that sensation. So,
And then, oh
so
my
happy
God,
for you.
what a fantastic feeling. It's yes, this is such a good feeling.
That's incredible. Are you in menopause, perimenopause, or postmenopause? I have found the absolute best products called Parlor Games. I use the estriol and progesterone topical creams, and they have been game changers. Maybe you've listened to the show and want to be featured as a guest. Eve uses Podmatch to connect with new or potential guests. Reach out and begin the process today. I know that from my little bit of research and knowledge about ayahuasca, it makes you sick to your stomach, right? Or at least that's what I've seen when I've watched it on TV.
It's known for purging, which
Right.
didn't happen for me. I
Okay.
actually was waiting for it. I was desiring it. It was so intense. I thought that if I could purge, I would feel some relief, and there were people purging around me. I actually had my head in a bucket for hours waiting for it
Thinking
to
you were
happen.
sexually, you didn't need purging. You just needed reawakening. I think for certain things, it could elicit purging depending on what it is, but for you, that wasn't the case. You didn't need to purge. And so the plant medicine gave you what you needed, which I think is really incredible. I just had Leslie Draffin on the show a few episodes ago, and she talked about psilocybin and how it can help with depression and with anxiety and also help your libido as well. So, in microdosing. And so that was very interesting. And I'm always looking for things to enhance my life in general, but especially spice things up in the bedroom. And I know that for me, cannabis has been a big assistance. Let's just put it that way. It helps to heighten my sensation and it helps me to stay focused. Sometimes it also makes me go off on tangents in my mind, but it helps me to be connected to my body.
Yeah.
How have you used cannabis to enhance your sexual life?
I would say similarly. I don't we both of us, we really enjoy the lovemaking we do when we do edibles. I make brownies, but we don't want to be using it all the time. We use it as a teacher to show us what's possible. But of course, the plant medicine creates its own possibilities. And I like what you said about it heightens your somatic experience. It really pulls us into our body. I feel like my nerve endings are heightened. So
Yes.
that feeling of penetration has totally wowed me when we've done cannabis than more than when I'm straight. But I am seeking that experience of sober excitement in that same way. And I feel like we can go back and forth and study it. And I think it's a worthwhile way of studying. I also find that when I get high with cannabis, it does recreate that libido feeling in a very heightened way for me. And it never did before the ayahuasca. But since doing ayahuasca, it's almost like it realigns me with that feeling. But I don't need to be high to feel turned on. I feel turned on just talking about this.
It's funny that you say that because often after filming or recording a podcast or two, I have to get my partner to meet me in the bedroom because I'm like, I have been talking about sex all day long. I need you.
Let's do it. Let's not talk about it. Let's experience it. So,
Exactly.
one of the funniest and unexpected experiences in the last year is that I got completely obsessed with Pride and Prejudice, starting with the 2005 film with Keira Knightley and Matthew McFadyen or Fadian, however it's pronounced. That led me to listening to the book on tape, and then I got introduced to fan fiction or Pride and Prejudice variations. And one of the things that came to my mind in reading the book was number one, this sense of civility, of really being very caring about one's partner that I felt like these two characters came to at the end of the book. That and the way that they apologize to one another for their misperceptions and misinterpretations of one another, which made me wonder. I thought, what would their sex life be after their marriage? Now, Jane Austen was not married. I don't believe she had a romantic relationship. So and of course, because of the early 1800s, that's probably not how she would write. It leaves us just up to the marriage, but not beyond. So when I heard about the variations, I thought there's got to be someone who's written about what their marriage would be like. And I did seek out and find a number of books, and I found a particular author, Linda Wells, who wrote such beautiful, great stories, really well written, but incredible sex scenes. And I found by reading this, I got number one, it made me want to masturbate. And my husband and I live apart for part of the year because he works overseas for a few months at a time. So we always have this time where I'm alone for a couple of months or
That I think, in my opinion, distance makes the heart grow stronger. And I think that distance sometimes is helpful in relationships to really, when you get back together, really appreciate and reignite what you have. Do you agree with that?
I totally agree with that. It's like
Yeah.
we there's the possibility of building the sexual tension, but it has to be with intention. There are earlier times where he was spending time over there and it wasn't in my mind because I wasn't open. But now that I was reading this Pride and Prejudice and I was masturbating and I was thinking, oh, it'll be really fun to have an actual person with me to have sex with, but also truly enjoying masturbating for the first time in my life because I never really was that interested in it. I just wasn't very sexual. I felt always very sensual, but not sexual. And suddenly in Pride and Prejudice, it or these variation novels awakened this desire to to experience myself in that way because in her books, Linda Wells' books, there's near constant arousal between these two people. And then just all the different ways that they couple and all the tender or the passionate ardor or inside and outside, and just all the places that they imagine having a chance to express their passion and this is something I just recently tuned into, is that I've always related sex with lust, but not love.
Interesting.
And in these Pride and Prejudice books, novels, it's all about this is my love. Or love me. She asks, love me, please love me. And it's her asking him to join with her in this physical way. And I was able to, with my husband, say just that just recently, saying, I feel our passion. I love our lust, enjoying this kind of feeling of selfishness that we both get into, of looking for our own pleasure. But I'm looking for this love. And I remember saying at one point, I said, I'm going to imagine as you thrust that you are thrusting your love into me. Because I never really thought about it that way. And then another time I said, I still want to explore where love, this feeling of love comes from. So I'm just going to say, I love you, which we don't do when we make love, my
Okay.
husband and I. And then he started to do it. And so we started to explore it. And then afterwards we talked about what it felt like. And I didn't feel the love. I was saying it, but I didn't feel it.
Okay.
But I was able to say that. And of course I love him, but it wasn't like I was experiencing this passion and this sexuality as love yet. So I feel like I'm looking forward to seeing how I can bring those two things together.
That's incredible. What a story. And again, I'm loving your honesty and saying that you relate sex to lust, but not love. And you've been married for how long?
We've been together 38 years.
38 years. That's amazing to me.
Yeah.
And for me, sex is the most incredible expression of love. But you're absolutely right that it can just be lust.
Well, I would say
um,
I would say pleasure. I've
sure.
always been thinking of it as pleasure.
And it is pleasure, but the pleasure and the love together, the emotion of the love when you're experiencing the pleasure just heightens the whole experience. So the fact that you are trying to make that connection and you have verbalized it with your husband, all of these things are things that people have struggled to have conversations about. So the fact that we're having the conversation and that you're having the conversation with your husband is just great examples of what people can do in their everyday lives. So thank you for being so honest. And there's a song that I absolutely love called Joy in Repetition by Prince. I'm a big Prince fan. And it dates me, but I don't care because I will love Prince till I die. The song's hook is Love Me. And he just sings it over and over again. And it's such a, I love that song because it really, it sometimes when that's how I want to feel when I'm making love. I want someone to
Mhm.
love me. And the fact that you're telling your husband that you're going to tell him and then he was telling you, I think eventually it will definitely click. And I know that for me and my partner, I like to hear it too. And it doesn't have to be every time, but I always tell him, tell me. That's his that's his cue to tell me what I want to hear. And it doesn't always have to be I love you and I do that a lot, but it can be anything kinky or any sexual. I like to have that dirty talk, right? And the conversations that you're having are pretty spicy with your husband, wouldn't you say?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. You're having conversations maybe pre-sexual experience in
I
order
feel
to
yeah, I feel like we're both shy that way. So one of the things that a friend of mine has talked about is using scripts from books. So I
okay.
have hinted to him that at some point I would like to look at one of these scenes and play them out, but we haven't tried it yet.
I think role playing is a great idea, and your husband seems game to opening that up. So
Mhm.
that would be maybe our next episode. I'll have to get
Bring me back
the
in a year and we'll do a
yeah,
role play.
absolutely. That sounds amazing. I want to ask you my final question that I've been asking all of my guests this season. What tools do you bring into the bedroom to make things more spicy?
I'm going to say two things. One is sound. And when I was writing my book, Delight in the Limelight, and I got to chapter 11 about the breath we take and the sounds we make, I did a lot of sound exploration, and I remember one time sitting at my desk here and going, "Ah," and also my husband comes running down with a big grin on his face, and I said, "It's not what you think."
But he wanted to see.
Exactly, and ever since then, we've always been pretty vocal, and since our now we're an empty nest home, we feel very free to make sounds, and we both love using our voice, and I think that bringing sound and free vocal expression into the lovemaking is a wonderful way to communicate what you're experiencing. Because if you're silent, people don't know. They have fewer cues. So it's a way of communicating, but it's also a way of expressing that feels good in and of itself. And combined with the pleasure of sex, having the sounds as well is just creates a more full body experience. The second thing I really love and my husband really loves is we love putting on music and dancing nude.
Okay,
And
that's
this
nice
is we
foreplay, nice afterplay.
exactly, and so we'll dance nude separate, and then we'll get close. We'll allow the body to again, this is my sensuality because dance is my background, dance movement therapy. So to be able to just, like, circle around and have our bodies touch as we are also relating to the music in the same way, we're getting into rhythm in the same way, and then we can bring it together into let it lead into the more intercourse part of our sexuality.
I love that. And that's your energy connecting with his energy, and first separately and then bringing it together. And for women, it takes women 20 to 25 minutes to get ready for physically for sexual intercourse, and a lot of that is preparing your the biggest sex organ in your body, which is your brain, and then also externally stimulating the vulva and clitoris, because a woman has to become engorged or have a hard on, quote unquote hard on, right? Just like a man needs to have an erection in order to be prepared for sexual intercourse. So I love using dance as foreplay. I think that is really a beautiful thing to do together. I also have a dance background, so I can completely relate. I'm usually the one dancing around naked, and my partner's watching me. He says he
That's
watches
true.
every move I make, and I'm like, are you really watching me at every move? And I'm always watching you. So
Aw.
it's nice to be that, have somebody that's that attentive. I want to make sure that my listeners can find you. So could you please let us know where we can find you?
Linda Ugelow, Ugelow, whether that's on TikTok or my website or LinkedIn is the best way. And if you are looking for speaking confidence, I have a speaker preparation checklist, and these are ways for you to feel grounded, focused, warmed up, and energized before you speak. But I think that these ideas are also helpful for any kind of place that you want to feel like you're bringing your whole self to your communication.
And where can they find that, Linda?
You can get the speaker preparation checklist at lindaugelow.com/rituals.
Perfect. Okay. So make sure you check that out. And I will be checking that out because I want to start doing some more public speaking. And I know that I shake in my boots every time I have to do any kind of public speaking. I definitely think that would definitely help me for sure. I want to thank you again, Linda, for being on the show today.
Thanks so much for having me, Eve. This was really fun to chat with you.
It really was. I had a lot of fun giggles today. So thanks a lot for being on the show. Until next time. Looking for the best live streaming or podcast recording site? Look no further than StreamYard. Get $10 off your first purchase. For podcast hosting, Buzzsprout is the absolute best option out there. Get $20 off your first purchase. Feel free to call me on the OWL app. Use code EH576472 for $10 free to use on the best networking app around. Give me a call. If you're experiencing sexual issues and need a physical therapy consultation or appointment, Reach out to Eve and make an appointment on pleaseme.online. See all links and info in the show notes.